Today on Community Connections, we have a very special show with Robert Pinsky, Michael Thomas, and Andrew Demirjian. I'd like to thank the three of you for coming. I have with me today Robert Pinsky, a Long Branch native, who we're happy to have back, and Michael Thomas and Andrew Demirjian from Monmouth University. Thank you very much for coming.
It's great to be here.
Pleasure.
Now, you're Long Branch native. You might be the only one here who can say Long Branch native.
I feel sorry for you.
You grew up here, went off to college, and became a poet.
So they tell me.
Yes, well, I think that's a fair estimation that you've done that.
Robert Frost said that you should never call yourself a poet. It's something for other people to say.
I think the three of us would agree that you are. What brings you back is a special performance here at Monmouth University, combining your love of words and music.
Yeah. I'm happy to say I'll be performing with the wonderful jazz bassist Ben Allison. And for several years now, my dream, going back to Long Branch High School, incidentally, I not only attended Long Branch High School, I'm the son of two graduates of Long Branch High School.
Wow.
My parents met at Long Branch High School.
That's
so to be more in the department of more Long Branch than thou, I have it cornered.
Did you ever eat at Sherm's Deli?
I went to school with, what was her name, Carol Sherman. I was at Sherman's Deli many, many times.
My great uncle.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's wonderful. So you're a cousin of Carol Sherman?
Somewhat distant, because
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you where she is.
Yeah.
But when I first ran for office in 1986, I stood up in a room full of senior citizens and they said, well, what's your connection? Did you have any family here? Because I was only here a couple of years. I said, no, but my great uncle had Sherm's Deli. And
You're made.
Yeah.
And it was a good deli.
Yeah, it was.
I still sneer at the deli in my neighborhood in Cambridge, the S&S, which looks to many people like a regular good deli, but if you're from New Jersey and you've had real deli, you know that it's an imitation. What was the question?
It's whether you ever ate at Sherm's Deli. We were establishing Long Branch bona fides, and these two guys don't have any.
One more Long Branch High School fact that's germane to what I'm doing tonight. In my graduating class from Long Branch High School, in the class popularity poll, I was voted most musical boy.
Wow.
Excellent. Were you in the band? Or
Well, yeah, I was in the band. I was in all the bands. And if there's a rock and roll dance, I would be there honking on the tenor with my partners. So, yeah, that was my identity. It was my social identity, was a kid with the horn.
Now, what music did you listen to then?
Well, it was a mixture. Part of my mind was listening to the Modern Jazz Quartet and Miles Davis and Stan Getz and the great tenor players like Sonny Rollins. And in the other generation, you know, also was listening to Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins. Another part of my mind was listening to doo-wop, which was a New Jersey and Philadelphia thing. So, you know, Lee Andrews and the Hearts, which finds its way into my work, that kind of music. And rhythm and blues, which was what people wanted to hear at those dances, was something that rocked.
So were you writing them?
Yeah, it's exactly what I was wondering. Like, were you?
I was, I hope it's all vanished, but I was writing, yeah.
Were you at that point thinking about ever fusing the two, kind of bringing your writing and your musical interests together?
Maybe in a vague way. It's hard to remember. My daydreams were of being a great musician.
Right.
And the idea of being a writer in the social milieu of Long Branch in the late 50s, to be a writer meant to be a sports writer, write novels or something. That there's not a whole lot of model for poetry.
Right.
And I was writing. I was actually writing poems, but it was in a sort of hopeless corner of the mind way, barely looking at it. So the short answer, Andrew, would be no.
Yeah.
Or not really.
When did you first start to think I'd like to have some kind of musical accompaniment to the poetry.
I hope it's not accompaniment.
Well,
yes,
no, you're absolutely right, and that was a poor choice of words.
No, I really don't mean to be huffy, Andrew. But
No.
I'm trying to think about
it's a
it.
good thing
I'm trying
Ben's
to
not
actually think about the question. I was very aware that some of my poet friends, it was as though the poem was a film or the poem was an opera. And I was very aware that for me, the poem was like some jazz chorus, putting more emotion and then back in more, and that's how I wanted it to be. So the writing, the melody of each sentence, the cadences of the poems, the patterns of the vowels and consonants, in my mind, it was like as though what I wished I could do with the horn and couldn't do with the horn, I'm going to do it with, you know, every sentence has a melody. So that was always there. And then entirely by accident, not that many years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, 8 years ago, my poet friend Charlie Simic, who's a jazz aficionado, it turns out that Charlie's brother is a jazz booker, Milan Simic.
A
He
jazz
spells it
booker?
differently and pronounces it correctly.
What's a jazz booker?
He books acts into
Okay.
clubs.
Like an agent.
And Milan booked Charlie and me into the Jazz Standard in New York.
What year
with
is
that
this
great
about?
thing. What year is this about? I would say it was early 21st century.
Okay.
2003, something
it.
like that.
Yeah.
2004. I'm very bad at that. And it was with this, imagine, Mike Mignari, you know, one of the greatest vibes players ever, Mike Mignari, and Andrew Cyril and Lonnie Plaxico.
Oh man, it's just
So, fantastic musicians. And it transpired in the course of that evening that Charlie read poems to do with jazz and alternated with the musicians. And Charlie was not willing to read with the musicians. And I really was. And enjoyed it a lot. And it seemed to work.
Did you have to rehearse this?
That's
and get
just what I was going to ask. Was
It was
there
just
a,
like playing jazz. You knew the tunes, and we maybe rehearsed a little bit. I did a thing with Andrew, like trading eights or trading 12s, where I would read a couplet, and then he would do something. And I was addicted. That started it, and then there's a piece in the newspaper about that, and the people at Jazz Boston called me, and they had a benefit at Berkeley. They'd seen the story in the Times about Charlie and me, and I did a performance with Rockalam Bob Moses and Andrew Urbina. It went very well.
Also
And,
in Boston?
Yeah, at the Berkeley
Yeah.
Performance Center.
Okay.
And then I didn't look back. Then I just, I realized I like doing this, and I hope I do it in a way I put it is, I hope I'm not like an actor, I hope I'm like a horn player. So that my relation to the music is musical. And there's certain cadences and patterns of pitch in a poem or in a sentence. And then there are ones in music, and they can go together. But one thing I do sometimes is I'll read a 16th century poem. And
You didn't write a 16th century poem, though.
not quite. But here's Ben Johnson's Excuse for Loving. And I'll do it with the audience, just as though I was at a poetry reading, just straight ahead. And then I've done it with various instruments, and it adapts. It's so musical itself. Let it not your wonder move, less your laughter that I love. Though I now write 50 years I have had and have my peers. Poets, though divine, are men some have loved as old again. And it isn't always face, clothes, or fortune gives the grace, or the feature, or the youth. But the language and the truth with the ardor and the passion gives the lover weight and fashion. If you then would hear the story, first prepare you to be sorry that you never knew till now either whom to love or how. But be glad along with me when you learn that this is she of whose beauty it was sung. She shall make the old man young, keep the middle-aged stay, and let nothing hide decay, till she be the reason why all the world for love may die. Yeah, nothing's more musical than that. Let it not
Beautiful.
your wonder move. Let's, you know, and it just, he's speaking and he's also making music. If you then would hear this story, first prepare you to be sorry that you never knew till now either whom to love or how, but be glad. It's like Charlie Parker.
Yeah, totally. It's
You
a
know,
really
just
extended
keeps going, extending,
phrase,
extending
yeah.
further and further.
That's great.
And so I'll do that, and anybody who can hear that that's
Do the
real
musicians know
ear
what you're
candy.
about to say, or what
It's
you're
one
gonna
thing I
read?
do with them is some of the stuff they read. I mean, Lawrence in particular will study the poem and likes to have a copy of the poem in front of him.
Because
when
some
we're
jazz
playing.
musicians just want to, they want
But
go on improvisation.
of course,
Yeah.
and it's common. And a thing that I've done very often with these guys is I'm not lying to the audience. I said to the audience, now let's try a poem they've never heard or seen. I'll read it to you. They'll listen while I'm reading it to you. And then we'll give them about 10 seconds to rehearse. And then we'll do it the way you've been hearing us do these other things. And the audience is always astounded. It's not astounding to musicians because
Right.
that's how they work.
So Lawrence is the person the pianist that you work with on your CD.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Lawrence.
And so that one, he's kind of studying the poem, and will he present a series of musical phrases to you, or is it just boom?
Well, of course, that CD, Poem Jazz, that CD was made in the studio. And there are many takes of most of the tracks. Although there's one track that was just exactly the way we did it the first time. We left us talking in there as part of that. So that's more polished or studied. It's
Yeah.
mostly improvisation.
Right.
And there's one, my poem, The City, which, like almost all my work, does allude to Long Ranch. Lawrence takes a long solo, and it's the only one where there's it's one of two, but that's one of the few where it's his composition. It's a composition called When the Heart Dances. And he plays that melody through in variations several times. It's probably it's probably a long track. It's probably out of a 9-minute track. It's about half of it is Lawrence.
Oh,
and then
wow.
I come in and do The City.
Right.
Who was
They
more or
vary.
less satisfied in those takes? Was it you wanting to do another take, or was it him?
There was a producer there, an engineer. For one session, Kurt Owing was there. And it was just a conversation. And the one, it's the green piano is the one where you can hear on the record, you can hear Lawrence say, first of all, stride or walking bass? And I say, stride. And he says, that's what I thought too. And I say, okay. And then there's no second of all. He just starts playing this very comical thing, and we do it, and that's the track.
And it worked out.
Yeah, that one did.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll do the second half of the show.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
Monmouth University, a top-tier private university in New Jersey, 1 mile from the beach and just an hour train ride from New York City, a nationally recognized university, and so much more. Monmouth University is where your potential can be discovered under the guidance and encouragement of a committed hands-on faculty. A mentoring environment focused on moving students in a single direction, forward. Discover your real potential. Discover Monmouth University.
We're back for the second half of Community Connections. Robert, you actually, music and poetry have gone together for a long time, but you actually, I don't know if it would be fair to say you played with Bruce Springsteen, but you were on stage with him.
Well, I think it would be fair to say that we played together in both senses of the word.
Did you say?
We had a lot of fun. Bruce had a plan. He had studied my poems enough where he had a song of his that went with each poem, and I think it did demonstrate that he has an unusually strong sense of subject matter amongst rock musicians, an unusually strong sense of subject matter, and a sensitivity to social realities that's very unusual too. And there was something that clicked between the two bodies of work and between the two people. We were friends.
Two guys from Jersey.
Well, born in the same hospital,
There you go.
Monmouth Memorial Hospital.
Uh-huh. Do you still think of yourself as someone from New Jersey?
I do.
Good. Now,
Only in the sense that the Pope is Catholic.
I'm not quite sure I know what that means.
Means definitely yes.
Okay. Now, when you did this show with Springsteen, was it Fairleigh Dickinson?
Yes.
How did you guys do that?
There's a wonderful writer and musician, Wes Stace, who plays as John Wesley Harding. And Wes was sort of the MC, and he asked us questions, and Bruce played behind my poem Shirt. We read one poem together. Bruce did songs just with two guitars, and I think for a lot of the Springsteen fans in the audience, they liked hearing unproduced acoustic versions of his best-known songs. It was all pretty intimate. You know, it was not a stadium audience such as he's accustomed to. It was more a poetry scale, a few hundred people. And it was a real conversation, thanks partly to Wes Stace and partly because why waste time? And Bruce was thinking. And I was trying my best to think too.
The poet.
It worked out.
It did. I think it did work out. You can hear a little bit of it in a video thing that the NEA put out about Wamfest, which a wonderful man and poet from Boston put together, where he teaches it fairly. It's words and music, Wamfest. And my friend Josh Ritter did a thing with Paul Muldoon, so that was the theme of it. And the NEA Wamfest thing, I'm proud to say you can hear Bruce read my poem Samurai Song, which is also on the Poem Jazz CD, and he accompanies himself on it. They're sister arts. Music and poetry are sister arts. They're not the same thing, but they are deeply related historically and in their nature.
Robert Lowell said in a criticism of Bob Dylan, said that Bob Dylan is not a poet. This was years ago, and he said that his guitar was the crutch for what he wrote. And there's always been that debate about songwriters and poets and
Well, I think Bob Dylan says Bob Dylan is not a poet.
Right, he does,
For me, the test is not even does the poet read it aloud. For me, the test is if anybody at all says these words aloud, is it art? Does it feel like a work of art? You know, I did that project, Favorite Poem Project, where you have a construction worker reading Whitman, a Cambodian-American kid reads Langston Hughes, and it's very moving. These people are not actors, they're not performers. And for me, that's poetry. For me, the culmination of my art, unlike a performer, is not me reading my poem to you. The culmination is if you read it. Anyone at all reads it. I write with my voice, but I write for your voice.
Did anyone who's in the public, in the poetry project, did anyone say, I want to recite the lyrics of a song rather than a poem like Langston Hughes?
We got thousands of letters, so I'm sure there were some who said they wanted to recite Cole Porter or Bruce or Bob Dylan or something. I'm sure they were in there. It was very well defined in my mind and in the project that what we wanted to hear was things that sounded like poetry without the support of music. So if there was a lyric that seemed that way, it would be there.
This was during, the Favorite Poet Project was during your tenure as the Poet Laureate of the United States?
Yeah.
Was that what kind of experience was that, being the Poet Laureate?
I'm not very big on titles and prizes. The experience was nice. Thanks to my friend Eric Wormser, I was introduced at a championship fight. I was introduced from the audience in Atlantic City. We had a poetry reading at the White House. There's a lot of sort of amusing things that come with it. But it's not that serious. What's serious is the Favorite Poem Project. And you can still go to favoritepoem.org and see those videos. So in my life, I have a family, I've written things, and I did the Favorite Poem Project. Those are significant. Poet laureate is a compliment. It's like somebody saying, hey, nice hair. Or it's not the same as something you did.
If you were to say, who are some of your favorite poets that work with jazz? Do we have time for another question? Or okay.
Please.
You know, was it Langston Hughes, or what are the kind of pairings that got you really excited?
I have never had any experience of poetry and music together that has meant a lot to me. I don't like art songs much. I like them best if I don't know the poem. If it's an Emily Dickinson poem or an Elizabeth Bishop poem, I don't like the distortion of the cadences and the pace. Of the beat people, I don't think Ginsberg knew much about music. In fact, I know he didn't. The one who comes the closest to doing something that I kind of like is Rex Roth, who knew the jazz musicians that he read with in San Francisco. But I hope it doesn't come off more arrogant than I mean it. I hope it comes off only as arrogant as I mean it. I'm not aware of anybody that does what I do. It's a little bit different, and I think it works in our favor. People are prepared to be kind of embarrassed. I think this is going to be corny, and then they're relieved when it isn't.
Well, when some people think of a poetry reading, they'll say, oh, is somebody bringing a set of bongos? You know, so this influence of the beats. And
bongos, berets, and the producer, Richard Connolly, and I, when we did the CD, we were both old enough to have made frequent references to Percy Dovetonsils, who was Ernie Kovacs' character. Ernie Kovacs had a character. He put on glasses that had kind of weird eyes. He put spit curls. He said Percy Dovetonsils was called Just Between the Bookends. So yeah, there's a long history of poetry being kind of stupid, and you hope you're departing from it at least somewhat.
How do you know Allen Ginsberg didn't know anything about jazz?
I talked with him about music.
That's what I thought your answer
And I've heard him play the harmonium.
Yeah, he used to do that reading sometimes.
Yeah.
No, the reason I asked is when you mentioned him, if you were asking me, you know, I always loved the poem Howl.
Oh, it's a great poem.
Yeah, and if you asked me my favorite poem, and not that I have a long list of them, that might have been what I said. So when you mentioned them.
Yeah, good taste there.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you still write a lot?
I write all the time, yeah.
Almost daily?
I think about it almost daily. And often writing isn't the right verb. I may be composing.
What's the difference?
Well, writing is you have an instrument of some kind. And composing is more like, take the word composing. Suppose I'm driving. It wouldn't be impossible to compose something while I was driving. So I'm composing. I may turn the word composing inside out, and I get possible, or suppose, or nincompoop.
So you're always
any
thinking about
nincompoop can compose himself while he's coursing down the highway, and to make an archaic reference of Plymouth, you know, you just get the P's and K sounds going. So that doesn't involve a stylus or a keyboard. It's making up.
Well, I would hope you could read something that you've written.
Well, just for you, Adam, I do have a poem, Creole, that does have a Long Branch mayoral race, as I alluded to in the poem, and it's probably important to cautionary say I make things up, that I'm not accurate. This is poetry, not
poems make things up,
not history. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The word poem means something made up.
Okay.
This poem, by the way, is on the new CD, and it's available on iTunes.
Excellent.
Creole, I do it with the pianist Lawrence Hubgood on iTunes. Creole. I'm tired of the gods. I'm pious about the ancestors, afloat in the wake widening behind me in time, the restless devisers. My father had one job from high school till he got fired at 30. The year was 1947, and his boss, planning to run for mayor, wanted to hire an Italian veteran, he explained, putting it in plain English. I was 7 years old. My sister was 2. The barbarian tribes in the woods were so savage, the empire had to conquer them to protect and clear its perimeter. So into the woods, Rome sent out missions of civilizing governors and invaders to establish schools, courts, garrisons. Soldiers, clerks, officials, citizens with their household slaves, years or decades or entire lives were spent out in those hinterlands. Hinterlands which might be good places to retire on a government pension, especially if in those work years you had acquired a native wife. Often I get these things wrong, or at best mixed up, but I do feel piety toward those persistent mixed families in Gaul, Britain, Thrace. When I die, may I take my place in the wedge widening and churning in the mortal ocean of years of souls. As I get it, the Roman colonizing and mixing, the intricate imperial processes of enslaving and freeing involved not just the inevitable fucking in all senses of the word, but also marriages and births, as developers, barbers, scribes, and thugs mingled and coupled with native people and peoples. Begetting and trading, they needed to swap, blend, and improvise languages. Couples especially needed to invent the Creole languages French, Spanish, German, and I confess I find that Creole work more glorious than God. The way it happened, the school sent around a notice. Anybody interested in becoming an apprentice optician, raise your hand. It was the Great Depression. Anything about a job sounded good to Milford Pinsky, who said he thought it meant a kind of dentistry. Anyway, Milford was bored, sitting in study hall, so he raised his hand, and he got the job, as was his destiny, full-time once he graduated. Joe Chavone was the veteran who took the job, not a bad guy. Dr. Weinberg did get elected mayor. Joe worked for him for years. At the bank, an Episcopalian named John Smock, whose family owned a piece of the bank, had played sports with Milford and gave him a small loan with no collateral. So he opened his own shop, grinding lenses and selling glasses. As his mother-in-law said, almost a professional. Optician comes from a Greek word that has to do with seeing. Banker comes from an Italian word for bench, where people sat, I imagine, and made loans or change. Pinsky, like Tex or Brooklyn, is a name nobody would have if they were still in that same place. Those names all signify somebody who's been away from home for a while. Schiavone, or Chavone, means a Slav or slave. Milford is a variant on the names of poets, Milton, Herbert, Sidney, that certain immigrants used to give to their offspring. Creole comes from a word meaning to breed or create in a place.
Thank you very much.
Bravo.
Perfect way to end.